I have 2200 hours in Siege. That's no small feat. It's officially the game that I have the most hours in, which was previously held by League of Legends. But why? What about Siege has kept me playing for nearly 3 or 4 years now? I've played a lot of games, I have close to 300 games in my Steam library, but something about Siege has just kept me engaged despite how frustrating and toxic it can be. I could talk about all the various elements of this game that comprise to make it an 8 out of 10, but I feel that's useless as it doesn't explain why I've continually kept playing instead of, well, just playing better games like Valorant or Titanfall 2. Valorant, as I explained in my reviews, is especially well made and is very much deserving of anyone's time. However, sometimes the game can be overall extremely well made, but still not be enjoyable. That's not to say that Valorant isn't. I actually really did enjoy Valorant, just using it as an example. But another good example is Fortnite, because no matter how constantly updated it is and how polished it is as a battle royale, I still prefer PUBG, even though I would say Fortnite is objectively the best. So something more than just quality, especially with how much I make fun of Siege for being buggy, keeps people to play a game. And this is mainly just an opinion piece, and I won't be doing this in the traditional essay style of my previous videos. This is a deviation from the norm, and I'm only going to use this format for very particular videos like this and potentially a few videos, sure. However, let's not waste any more time and delve right into the reasons why I still enjoy Siege and why it's my game. So I personally love realistic shooters and competitive games. The problem is that most games that are milsims or milsim-like games like Insurgency Sandstorm often don't have a strong competitive community or have gameplay that isn't conducive to a competitive scene. However, purely competitive games like League or CSGO have such defined metas with little room for fun to the point of being more frustrating and stressful to play after playing for like more than 100 hours. Siege, due to its destruction mechanics, gadgets, and abilities, has a sandbox that can both be utilized in competitive scenario as well as using it to use extremely stupid and risky strategies. Many of the competitive games that I enjoy, but eventually sour on, comes from the fact that there isn't much time to actually have fun. Siege has so many high-risk strategies that just throw your team into harm's way, but there's always exciting and are just a gamble if the enemy is watching for it. These sort of dumb strategies that provide no competitive edge, but is just meant to have fun. Fine. Up we go. Alright, that's concerning. That's concerning. Okay, got that. Dude, I just pulled the fucking coolest move with Oryx. Okay, dude. I'm fucking God, dude. I'm God. I'm God. Okay, I'm God, dude. Which is often a sorely missed opportunity in most games. I enjoy playing competitively, but playing a game competitively all the time stifles the variety that's in a sandbox. The problem with a game like League stems from the fact that while the game is filled with lots of items and characters, the issue is that only about 40 of them are viable, and everyone plays the meta. I can't have fun doing stupid stuff like Cho'Gath support or AP Sona mid. Siege, despite it being 5 years old, still hasn't reached the point of League or CSGO where they nerfed or buffed all the fun out the game. There are hints of it here and there, but it's never been as bad as other popular competitive games. The right amount of fun and competition is part of the reason I've continually played over the years. However, if that were true, then Valorant would have turned into my main game. It also comes from the fact that Siege combines this blend with a hint of realism in its underlying mechanics. Siege has never been a realistic game. If you really want to play a realistic SWAT style game, then there are other games in the works for that. But even though the guns handle unrealistically and the gadgets are definitely not realistic, it still maintains that core SWAT style gameplay it sold itself on. Siege has maintained its core gameplay despite it being years since the game's release, and while you could say that about most games, it's definitely felt like a new game after these 5 years. So much has been added or altered, especially with the maps and operators, to the point that the strategies that worked even 2 years ago no longer work the same due to how the maps and operators influence the flow of a match. Take for example, Vigil. Before his introduction, attackers were able to clear out roamers just by droning and pushing as a team. But Vigil put a huge damper on that. Now when there's a Vigil on the enemy team, once you acknowledge his presence, you need to pay attention to noise as much as possible, as that's the only way to accurately gather where he's at. That's assuming that the sound system is, actually accurate in Siege, but that's a whole different story. New operators especially force players to change how they play, Instead of being a game that never changes because they had a formula that worked, Siege has maintained the premise and continued to change the game numerous times, which makes the game enjoyable to follow and continuously play for years on end. However, regardless of all these changes, it still maintains that careful, strategic SWAT gameplay that is what attracted me to the game in the first place. I'm not playing a new game every year, but rather playing a new version every year until it eventually feels almost like a sequel. That sort of change, but still sticking to its roots, I think is why people love games like Divinity Original Sin, which retains its classic CRPG feel, but adds plenty of modern and new elements, and plenty of changes that are unique to that game. I know it's an entirely different genre, but whatever, you get the point, same difference. Siege has a toxic community, but it's really enjoyable and fun sometimes. I've come across people who absolutely do not care about the game whatsoever and just have a blast doing and saying the dumbest things possible, like rushing site with an M870 recruit rush, or, what I did, putting a C4 next to someone and exploding them if they don't get a headshot. But for as many of those kinds of matches I get, I probably get about 4 times as many people either just being assholes or just in general just being toxic. People have a tendency to take Siege far too seriously, and it leads to a really toxic environment. There's a very big difference between being competitive and just being toxic towards others. I legitimately feel bad for people who are new to the game, as they will most likely just be constantly barraged by hateful comments and being constantly told how bad they are because people are just so attached to winning matches in this game. It's insane because there is an unranked and casual game mode, but people still take it seriously regardless if you're just learning or messing around. The community in Siege really dislikes newcomers, or just underperforming in general, which is frustrating as it just pushes people away from the game. Don't get me wrong, Siege is not losing players by any means, but it's hard to get my friends into this game because people are just assholes, are playing extremely sweaty regardless of what game mode you're on. It's the reason the newcomers playlist had to happen. My recommendation for anyone trying to get into Siege is to find a group you can play with, because if not, the learning process is going to be painful and long. I really enjoy the community at times, and it has kept me playing here and there, but more times than not, it's extremely toxic and sway no matter what you do, to the point that it contradicts my first point about being fun, as the fun police show up and bully you until you either quit or perform. Arguably, this can be said about any game, but Siege has a particular big problem with toxicity, and while Ubisoft tries, I think it's just like a cultural issue and won't stop until there's a movement to end it. Also, for women, minorities, and those in the LGBT community, you're going to hear things that even make me cringe at how awful it is. It's genuinely sad to see a community that is this inconsiderate of others. However, sometimes just a few genuinely fun and nice people can save me from thinking it's all pure garbage, but your mileage may vary. It's just, for me, I've had a couple people and a couple matches where I legitimately enjoyed it, and it's kept me playing even longer than I probably would have. I'll just give a small mention to the progression system because it's definitely not the thing that's kept me playing this game whatsoever. The alpha packs take about like 5 to 10 games to get, and while that's pretty frequent, the drops they give are most of the time laughably bad. Once in a while you get something cool, but realistically, if you enjoy this game, nothing about the alpha packs are going to keep you playing, unless you have like an addictive personality or something. It's nice to have some rewards here and there for playing, but realistically it barely adds anything to the game and won't keep you playing if you're just kind of done with the game. But that being said, Siege is experimenting with battle passes, which I think helps implement a better progression system, but the issue with it stems from most of the items just being rather plain. I'm not spending time in the progression system that long. It's not, so we're just gonna move on. Siege is definitely far from being the best game I've ever played, but that's okay. It's still the game that I continue to play almost no matter what, because it's a game that seems to just hit all the boxes that matter to me personally. I'm not really a person who cares for MMOs because of how much of a time sink it is. It's part of the reason I started playing less of Destiny 2. But ironically, I put a lot of time into Siege simply because I enjoyed the grind to get better on it, or just having fun with friends, or things like that. I didn't care about the progression systems, and I normally don't, but Siege, with its lack of one, has kept me longer than possibly any other game. Honestly, it's just kind of important that we realize that objective value doesn't directly correlate to someone's enjoyment. I agree that games need to be analyzed for what they are, but everyone takes away something different. Pretty much the same point in my Dirty Bomb video as well. Sometimes all a game has to do is check your boxes in particular and you'll love it. People have separate things they look for in a game, and sometimes it's about convenience or even very specific types of systems, like in the case of Monster Hunter, where if you don't enjoy the sort of gameplay loop it offers, you'll never enjoy the game. If you enjoyed the video, go ahead and leave a like. If you'd like to see more, then hit that subscribe button. However, no matter what you do, vous avez une bonne journée.